Hey everybody, welcome back. This is a new episode of A Better Way with Gettys and Kimura podcast. And on this podcast, we're talking about something called TMS. And if you're not familiar with it, this is a condition where a person can have a really bad pain or another sensation or symptom in the body. And it doesn't actually come from physical damage or tissue damage or something like that. It comes from the brain and nervous system. And there are a lot of people who experienced something like this, and myself included, and also my guest today. Kat is going to tell us how she recovered from TMS. She had back pain, but also a couple other things. And I'm really excited to have her here today. I did one podcast before this, a couple of episodes ago, where I briefly talked about her experience, but she's here today telling in her words how things happen. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do, and so on.
Sure. So I'm Kat. I have known you now, I think, Kirsten, for probably 6, maybe 7 years. And I was in the sort of fitness world, I guess, for a little while, in and out. But right now, I would say I'm a mom, if somebody asked me, because I just resigned my corporate day job 5 weeks ago. So I am actually a home full-time mom right now with sort of some open options as to what my next step is. But I am a multicultural kid. I was born and raised in Charlotte, traveled, was very fortunate when I was young to travel all over the world. I have lots of Lebanese family, American family. We've been, all over far and wide. And yeah, so I have a lot of varied experiences and a lot of, I guess, just culture. I'm fortunate to have a lot of culture in my life. And so grew up very big family. Um, yeah, nothing really like super notable in terms of my background, but I was in corporate America in marketing for about 20 years, and then product marketing, and product management. And so I just resigned from a software role,
Mm.
to be at home for a little while. And that's
Yeah.
kind of my short and sweet version.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, then let's just dive into the topic of TMS and how
Yeah.
this happened. Just tell us your story.
Yeah. So where it started for me, I would say, I mean, now having been through TMS and looking back, I can see like moments in my childhood, but when I really had to sort of put the pedal to metal and figure out that it's TMS to heal was, I would say, 2017, which 7 years ago, right? I was early 30s, and I was dealing with some personal stuff that I was going through, and threw myself kind of into the gym and, personal development, just kind of throwing a lot at myself at one time, physically and mentally and emotionally, I think. And I ended up with some really severe lower back pain. I don't hear too many stories about people who had it worse than I did. I think I got to kind of the the really max end of kind of where you just go under the knife because you're just so tired of how much you're in pain all the time, and dealt with sciatica, dealt with sort of inability to move around and do things. And finally, I think that, so 2017 to 2019, it probably started a little before 2017, but in 2017 I remember thinking like, this is bad enough to where I'm sort of labeling myself as like someone who has back pain. And then in 2018, I dealt with it for a couple of years, just like I will not get surgery. I'm, fitness. I don't want to be benched, and I don't want to be out of the gym, and I don't want to take a break and, lose my whatever I had, been working towards at that point. And so I put it off for a couple of years in extreme pain. And then finally it got to the point where I just couldn't move around, couldn't walk. And I had a first surgery. I say first because I almost had a second, but I went under the knife, had a micro discectomy on L4, L5, L5S1. They, what they normally tell you when you go in and you get your, x-rays and your scans is you have herniated discs and you have bulges and you have pressure on this nerve and that nerve and, all these things. And so to my ears at that point, I think looking back, it was even more traumatic for me because I had put so much value into my body at that point and my fitness. And that was just so hard to hear that I'm broken or that something is wrong with my body. And so that fear and that anxiety starts to kind of increase. And I think eventually I just couldn't, I mean, I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything. I think I got myself mentally to the point of so much frantic nervousness that I made it worse, to the point where I couldn't figure out what it was. And I went under the knife. And I remember it was either, I think it was before I had my surgery. It might have been when we were talking and you told me, you know, there's this doctor, there's this book, you should read this. And you kind of put the bird in my ear. But I remember, and this is the part I wanted to like mention today, because I was thinking back and I'm like, she told me about this, what was it that kept me from looking into it the first time before I had a surgery and when I really could have made a difference early on. And I think what you, Kirsten, said to me was like, hey, just look into this idea of the mind being connected to the body and that maybe there's trauma that you could heal, something along those lines, right? Very simple, very short and sweet. And you didn't really push the point at all. And then I heard in my sort of with my background, which I can talk about later, but I've had a lot of trauma in my life. And so in my head, what I heard was your pain is coming from all of your trauma. And in order to heal your pain, you're going to have to heal all of that trauma. And
Mm.
I immediately sort of unconsciously like put that aside because I was like, that's not going to happen. There's no way I'm going to be able to heal all of it. Like I am this person who always is going to have these issues. And if that's what's causing my back pain, forget it. Like it's never going to go away. And I was still very stuck on the physiological. It's a structural issue. Clearly, I have bulging discs and I have all this discomfort. And it's very much my spine that's causing me problems. It's not anything else. And so I pushed that to the side, I think the first time you told me about it. Um, and then, so 2019, I had the surgery. 2021, 2 years later, I was still in pain, almost had a second surgery. And I'll just kind of cut this shorter. But basically, in that time from 2019 to 2021, nothing changed. And then in 2021, I found TMS, reading and work and some other tools that I used. And 2021, in the fall of 2021, was the end of my pain. And so I'm 3 years now. Almost next month will be 3 years pain-free,
Oh, that's
which,
so awesome.
yeah, I would have thought I would be saying that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild.
What was the book that I recommended you back then? Was it John Sarno's?
I think it was Sarno. I think it was Mind Body Prescription or one of those. One of the main Sarno books, and then from there I branched out. But yeah, that was a great recommendation because it was the perfect start, at least for me.
What
Just
made you
intro.
pick up the book then eventually in 20, what did you say, 2021? You finally read it. What was it?
Yeah, well, I think I started probably in 2020. I had it on my Kindle though for years before that because I'm the type of person where if somebody gives me information, I'm going to store it and be like, maybe I'll come back to this. I need this. This seems important, or this person. And I obviously trusted your advice, and you knew me very well. And I was like, if she thinks it's worthwhile, then I should look into it. And I remember getting the book and probably started reading it. I don't recall the details are vague, but I probably picked it up and put it down. And I was like, this isn't what's wrong with me.
Mm.
And I want to say, if I'm being really honest with myself, if I had not had a surgery and tried to fix the quote unquote physical issue with my back and it failed, that surgery failed, I don't know if I would have entertained the idea of TMS ever because it still felt so far-fetched. And I know when I try to tell people about it and I see the look in their eye and the look on their face, and I'm like, they reacted the same way I reacted in the beginning. They just think
Yeah.
it's, BS. But I think because I had a failed surgery and I was like, if this didn't work, it
Mhm.
can't be physical. Like it can't be that I don't understand why this wouldn't work. And maybe there's an alternate reason that this is happening. And then my mind was open to TMS. If I hadn't had surgery, I don't know that I would have gotten there, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I'm stubborn and I think I know, I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, it
it's a
makes
hard one.
sense, right? The surgery didn't do what it was supposed to do, quote unquote, like fix your back, but it,
Yeah,
it pushed you in the right direction. Like, pick up the book
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Start.
And like pain would move around, right? Like one day it's there, one day it's not, and then it's this side, but it's also this side. And like I think I had put together enough data on my body and on things I had been through that at that point I was like, okay, the results, the hypothesis that I had was, flawed and the results are not what they should be, and therefore let me reassess. And I think that's where in my mind I started to go back to like really opening my mind up to other options.
Okay. Well, let's look back to that time when your back pain started. Usually there's some sort of stress or a stressful period in your life or lots of emotions or something is going on, something that's kind of like brewing for a little while
Mhm.
before it starts coming out as physical pain or another symptom.
Yeah.
Was this the case for you too?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I know we use the term like highly sensitive people or whatever else. I would say I'm a sensitive person anyway. So in my sensitive emotional world, there was probably always something going on in my life. There always is, right? I always have a reason to feel, not
Mhm.
great. I can always find something. But at that time, like kind of bird's eye view, I was going through a divorce, right? I had lost my sense of self, my sense of, um, I'm not a failure. I can stay married and succeed in a marriage and make it work, and I'm not going to give up. And was forced to kind of give up. Um, Found myself in just really difficult personal relationship situations that made me question a lot of stuff, right? Things you have from childhood, issues, it was a very tough time, I would say emotionally, but also a very lost time. And I think that at least for my TMS, it's mostly 90 something percent of the time rooted in fear. I don't have a whole lot of anger, um, or other emotions that I really contend with on a regular basis that I would say besides fear. I think fear is usually my number one that most affects me and that kind of triggers me the most, so to speak. And with, yeah, 2017, 18, I was going through a divorce. There was a lot of fear, right? Like, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be with? Am I going to be by myself? Like, what am I going to do about, whether it was financial stuff or life situations? What am I going to tell my family? What are people going to think of me? Like, there was just a lot of insecurity and fear. And so that was probably a huge trigger. Um, and just not making great decisions, I would say, around that time in other things too, but mainly like close personal relationships were like a huge thing that affected my emotional state and how much fear I had on a daily basis with things I couldn't necessarily deal with then or put to bed, right? I had to just continue to go through them. And I think my mind maybe couldn't handle it, and therefore my body was like, we're gonna put this in her back, or we're gonna put it wherever my pain decided to go that day.
Yeah, yeah, the fear, it did come out
Yeah.
physically, right? The things that you
Yeah.
felt inside, but maybe didn't express. Well, did you express these fears to anybody in writing, in any kinds of
Well,
way? Was it just like sitting in your head all the time?
yeah, I think I don't want to say spiraled because that sounds, like, wow, she really, lost herself. But with a divorce and then, following, like I said, some other things that happened that weren't great. And then in my family, my younger brother, who is now passed, but he was going through a drug addiction problem and was living with me. And I think I also felt like I couldn't necessarily take the time and space that I needed to deal with my stuff or to be really selfish in those moments because I was dealing with, helping him. He came to live with me, helping him recover, helping him figure out what to do. Um, I think there were moments where I thought, like, wow, a lot of the things he's going through, I should probably work through, talk to therapists, do 12 steps, like whatever things, maybe those would help me. And I remember trying to do things together, but he was always, it was just a lot, I'll say. Like there was a lot there to deal with and to help him. And I was emotionally really drained from having, going through a divorce. My, ex also had some issues that with drugs as well, and I had to help him deal with, and was pouring out a lot of my sort of energy and effort into other people, and
Hmm.
my concern and my worry, right? Of like taking on, kind of like we do as empaths or whatever, taking on other people's feelings and problems and emotional states and worrying about them. And I think I wouldn't have even known how or where to begin to address my own stuff. I did know that I had a need for fixing whatever was going on, right? I'm like, I need to see a therapist, or I need to go work out to stay healthy. I need to eat well because I'm going to be depressed or I'm going to be anxious. Like I remember thinking these things and trying to take care of myself, but I don't think I gave myself space for that genuine space and energy.
Yeah, you had a lot on your plate. I remember those times, and you are a really, really caring person and concerned about people who are closest to you, obviously, right? And feeling like you not that you need to fix their stuff, but it just comes naturally to us that we
Yeah.
want to help so much. How do you not care, right? How do you
Yeah.
not care that your brother has these problems
Yeah.
and he's living with you and you see this stuff so close? Obviously, you care and you just
Mhm.
took it on very strongly, right?
And I think that's something about me too that I've learned that I've taken with me is like, I'm always, if I'm in a position to help, I want to help, but
Hmm.
saying no is really hard. Right. And that's
Mm.
one of the things now I tell myself all the time of like, makes me feel selfish or it makes me feel like not a good person. But then I have to remember that, it takes me down a really dark path and then I'm really no good to anyone on the
Mm.
floor, unable to move.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, this is a really good way to start talking about personality traits too,
Mhm.
because a lot of people who have TMS have certain personality traits, such as
Mhm.
people pleasing, and like you mentioned too, cannot say no, caring for
Yeah.
everybody, giving everything, right? And putting yourself last. So what are some of the other ones that you can see in yourself that make sense here?
Gosh, I was always like overachiever, whether it was in school or, you know, sports, whatever, anything, that was competitive in nature, right? It's like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it really well and I'm going to succeed. But I think also people pleasing and the do gooder or whatever, we call the folks who just want to be seen as good and they want to do good things and they want to make sure that people know that they're not bad, right? That I'm not inherently bad. I'm not an evil person. I think that for a long time for me was a big deal because even in my relationships, it's like, am I being kind enough and loving enough? Am I being selfish? Am I being the best wife? Or is their family thinking I'm taking good care of them? Would they expect more out of me? Does the family want to see us more? Do I need to bend over backwards to like all these thoughts were always in my head of how can I make other people, sure that I'm a good enough person or, you know, just not a bad person. And I think that for a long time has been my sort of automatic thought that I have
Hmm.
in my mind all of the time. Um, but yeah, putting a lot of just pressure on myself at any time, right? Of even if it's things like I feel shame or I feel guilt, and then it's, well, I shouldn't be ashamed or I shouldn't feel guilty. I need to figure out how to get rid of this. Like, there's just so much pressure I put on myself. And I remember recently talking to a neighbor and saying um, something like, oh, well, I want to get better and I need to do this and that. And she's like, but do it for you. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, but also, I really want to do this because I have a daughter now and I really want to make sure that I leave, I teach her the right thing and I leave a good impression on her and show her that she has a strong mom. And she looked at me and she said, that's just even more pressure on yourself. She's like, you keep going back to just finding ways to put more pressure on yourself. And she's like, I'm saying, do it for you to relieve pressure. And in that moment, I remember like my skin was crawling and I'm like, holy crap, I've never really like thought about this in that way. But I just continue to take on more and more for the sake of never myself, right? For other people or for a reason outside of myself, which, shouldn't be necessarily the case if you're, um, working through stuff. But yeah.
I'm so sure that the listeners are like raising their hands left and right now because we are this way, unfortunately, but we can unlearn it too. It doesn't have to stay this way. We don't have to unlearn everything about our personality traits, but we can soften a little bit so that we are not so hardcore. Like you said, this was pretty recent, this conversation with your neighbor. So this thing still
It's
come
still
out, but you're able to kind of soften your approach and understand, you
100%.
know. But did you ever feel like you also had this need to be approved by other people and get like recognition, anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think in that time period too, right, coming out of a divorce, what that leaves you with emotionally is like, am I lovable? Will people like me? Is there something about me that's so inherently flawed that, even this person who in my mind back then was perfect for me and we were going to spend our lives together, even they rejected me? Like, it would be so much easier for people who don't even know me to reject me. Like, why? And that triggers all of the things you're talking about all over again because you're like, I need to be better and I need to make sure that there's nothing wrong with me and I need to fix the things that may be wrong with me. And, even if you're convinced that it's someone else's problem that led to your divorce, I think you go through those emotions and you
Mm.
contend with yourself in the end
Mm.
and all of the things about yourself that you don't like.
Yeah. Before you mentioned like getting really into fitness too at some point, you were very much so. Do you feel like this was also, did you try to just like myself, like really change my body to be seen as like the fittest person on earth and
Oh
really
yeah.
over it that way?
Oh yeah. And I
Yeah.
think like, so you know this, but I guess I'll go way back because so when I think back on my TMS journey throughout my life, there were other times I didn't know it was TMS and I didn't deal with it in a way that I dealt with my back pain through TMS recovery. But in grade school, stomach aches, I would go home. I remember I would call my family and go home all the time because I had these terrible stomach aches as like a 11 and 12 and 14-year-old, which didn't have any real cause, right? There was nothing physically wrong with me, never has been, but I was convinced that I just was going to be so sick and I couldn't be at school. And I would run home. This is me like running from something that was triggering me, I guess, at school or that I was nervous about. And then teenage years, I had terrible migraines to the point where they tried to prescribe medications for me. I would vomit, just from how intense they were. Real, true physical pain. But I'm
Sure.
telling you, there was no cause of, like, it was no physiological problem with me.
Yes.
And then in my 20s and early 30s, even right, 20s into probably where the back pain started, I dealt with really bad eating disorders. And I remember we've talked about this because I had really bad amenorrhea for several years, and then it came back for several years again later because after my divorce, I pushed myself so hard to be, my best version of myself, which included
Mm.
being attractive and being fit and taking care of myself and being stronger than the other person. And, you know, a lot of days it was just having somewhere to go, right? Like I'm going to the gym and I'm the person, like I'm going to go spend hours in the gym. I didn't have anything else going on. So I triggered probably more of that sort of eating disorder mentality. I ended up with amenorrhea. Um, and still from there, right, the back pain started, like it just kept multiplying and multiplying and things I think throughout my life. Other aches and pains, here and there. Like I remember gastritis, and like I had an ulcer. I had such bad acid gastritis issues in my stomach that I gave myself an ulcer and I was in the hospital at one point for a few days. Just random things that are caused by your mind
Mhm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh my God, it blows my mind how similar our stories are as our
Yeah,
symptoms.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we both.
I've been, yeah, through all of it, right? Like we've been through all of it, but I think the one that's truly stopped me and stopped my life, like physically could not do life anymore, was the back pain because I couldn't get up. I couldn't
Mhm.
feed my dog. I literally couldn't open the thing to put food in her bowl. I couldn't shower myself. I couldn't put my own pants on. Like I'm just laying in the floor in tears. I remember like sobbing, thinking like, how much longer do I have to deal with this pain? It's so excruciating and it's going to kill me. Like I remember saying like, I really wish I were dead towards the end. And they'd call in more meds to the pharmacy, and I couldn't even go pick them up. Like I can't even go get my own medication. I'm just stuck here and I'm going to die here. And it got dark. I mean, those were dark, dark times compared to some of the other things that you can still function, right? And continue life with migraines and with stomach aches. But the final one was like, this is too much. Like something has to change.
Mhm.
And now looking back, I'm grateful, right? Because I
Yeah.
have a tool that I didn't have then. But it was rough.
Did the meds ever help you?
No, no, and I'm a big you kind of know this, but I'm a big sort of natural person. I don't like to take pharmaceutical drugs or anything like that. And so it was harder for me mentally, I think, to even admit that I needed some and then to actually take them because then there was more guilt and more whatever about taking medications. But no, I don't remember the pain ever going away. And I was on some strong ones at the end. You name
Mhm.
it, they prescribed it. And I did all the things, right? I did like patches and creams and over the counter whatever, and I changed my diet and I took out sugar and I took out dairy and I tried an anti-inflammatory diet and I tried structural, I remember I subscribed or bought that Move You program because they were the ones who like heal your wrist pain and your ankle and this and that and your back, and I'm like, oh, these people know what I'm going through. Did that whole program, didn't help. Chiropractic, everything, steroids, all of it that leads up to the surgery, and none of it helped. Not even the like really strong prescription meds that would knock you out. But even then, I'm like I couldn't sleep and couldn't get knocked out because I was in so much pain that I would just immediately wake up the second I tried to even move. Sometimes not moving and I was in pain. Like they were futile. There was no reason to even have taken them.
And obviously, they led you a pretty bad depression too, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like you really don't feel like you have any reason to even
yeah,
be here anymore, right? So it's
yeah,
just like sleeping and laying down and sleeping more, and you know,
yeah,
that's really dark.
exactly. It is. Yeah. Dark, dark times. I feel
Yeah.
for people in those positions. And this is why like telling the story and like, you know, explaining what you go through. I hope that people like hear and it resonates because I just hate for people to continue to go through that when there is such an easy and fast solution. Not maybe not fast for some, but easy and really accessible, free, solution to your pain, actual solution to the pain. This is not a band-aid for your symptoms. This is like, I still think about it sometimes and my mind is blown, but I'm like, I can't believe that this is how easy it was.
Yeah.
And this is all I had to do.
Yeah. And like I said, it's free and it doesn't only get you out of pain, it just changes your life,
Yeah.
like quality of life. Like we'll come
Mm.
to that a little bit later because I definitely want
Yeah.
to hear how you are different as a person because I
Yeah.
know the difference. But tell us a little bit more like how did the change then begin? What were the first steps when you figured out, okay, this is
Yeah.
TMS. what am I gonna have to do with this now, knowing now?
So, like I said, it was kind of the, okay, so it wasn't physiological, or in my mind, I'm like suspecting at that point that it's not, there's nothing, physically wrong with me or my spine or any other part of my body, right? It's not the way I walk. It's not the slight scoliosis. It's not anything that was previously wrong with me when I had no pain. And so I read, I think Sarno was the very first book that I read. And then immediately I'm like, I need to look up some more of this. And I think I said in my write-up, I came across like the Curable app and some other podcasts and some other doctors and videos and Google Talks. And I just ingested a bunch of information. And the more I listened and sort of listened to people's stories, but also kind of, what's the word, came to terms with or really accepted what they were saying,
Yeah.
the more I thought, okay, I think I'm almost sure this is what my issue is like it's a mind body thing. I'm pretty sure it's my thoughts, it's my stress, it's my feelings about things, and I don't think there's anything physiologically wrong with me. And I would go through that over and over. I think for like several weeks or a couple of months, I went through that same, like, yes, I'm here and I'm convinced now in my mind that it's TMS, and then I would go back a couple of days later to like, well, I did a lot of walking and now it's hurting more again. So like, I think it is related to, and I would second guess myself again. And it took me, I think that was the hardest. It was like getting to the point where I'm genuinely 100% convinced that it's TMS and there's nothing that will convince me ever again that something is physically wrong with me. Once I got to that point, I was really like healing and on my way. But getting there was the hardest part because you'll go back and forth and you're like, but maybe today this pain is actually soreness and it's not TMS, and maybe I did tweak something. And you know multiple times I remember just going back and then having to go back to the stories or back to people's podcasts or whatever to listen to kind of convince myself again of the same thing of like, what was it that initially that made me think? And I would hold on to these like tidbits of information of like, okay, this is why I really do think, it moved this time, or it's not the same pain it was before, or whatever reason I had to be like, okay, this is definitely TMS. And I would hold on to those things until I was genuinely convinced. And then getting to that point was kind of the turning point, right? I was like, how do I keep this going? How do I get rid of my emotions? And that was led into journaling, which initially for me, I went into journaling with the mindset of, yeah, I have a lot of problems, right? I have a lot of stress. I have a lot of issues in my life that I probably should deal with that cause me continued and perpetual stress. Sometimes it's the same trigger and the same stress over and over because I don't deal with it. But the point in my journaling was not to deal with those things. It was just to put them out there. And I
Hmm.
remember it might have been you that told me like, write it and shred it or write it and burn it or whatever. I throw it away. And so I started, if I couldn't like burn it, I would shred into tiny pieces these journal entries that were just, emotional vomit, basically, of me just saying, I hate this and I hate that and I feel this way and I'm so frustrated because of this and I wish this person wasn't this way. And it was like a small child, like you gave a small child, a microphone and they're just screaming all these things that like bother them. And that's kind of what it was. I guess it was like my inner child that I've been suppressing and telling, don't act that way. That's not appropriate. Don't think that way. It's not appropriate. Don't do this. It's not acceptable. This isn't, you're a lady. You're someone's wife. Like, don't say these things, or you were raised better than that. And those were the things that were coming out, was like, I don't want to have to be like this, or why do I have to do this when I, do like just these frustrations. But more, like I said, more than frustrations, eventually it was fear. All of it led back to some underlying fear of like, it's because I think that they won't like me, or it's because I think that I'm not good enough, or it's because I'm really genuinely afraid that even though I say, you know, just as an example, like, this is my profession, I'm a marketer, I'm good at it. What if I have imposter syndrome and I actually suck at it and people are going to call me out on that? And that's where these frustrations with work or with whatever would come from, was me being insecure or scared at the end of the day of something. And so the journal entries started to become more of, oh, this is frustrating me. And then at the bottom of them, it would get down to like, it's because I'm genuinely scared that this is going to happen. It's probably not realistic, but this is where it comes from. Do I deal with that fear? Does it go away? No, I don't know how. Maybe a lot of therapy someday could help me like do it. But today, for me, it doesn't matter that I solve the problem. It's just that I get it out and I admit to myself that I'm having these feelings.
Right.
And that's all it takes. Like, I don't have to fix them. I just have to be with them and then shred them and throw them away and make sure nobody reads them.
Hmm. Oh my God, it's so fascinating. So, we are solvers and fixers, but you didn't have to solve or fix. You just
Yeah.
had to. So was it about the story that you had to write out like XYZ, like these things are annoying me, or was it that you got out the emotion, or was it both? What do you think?
I still think about this as I journal a lot because I'm like, I feel like there are always going to be things, stories, events, things that happen in my life that are going to be difficult. So like I'm always going to have emotions. And I think for me, the point of it is just to not let them fester and
Hmm.
not um, let them build. So like if I don't address, because I'll start to feel even emotionally, like, yeah, I might feel a twinge in my back or like physical pain, but I also emotionally, right? You feel like you're getting wound up a little
Hmm.
tighter and a little tighter and a little tighter. And I've started to connect those things. And when I start to feel a sense of like nervousness or frustration or somebody's triggering me in a way to where I'm like, I'm in a situation where I'm just getting uncomfortable and I don't feel at ease here, that's where I have to check in. And it may not be in the moment, right? It may be I'm out for a whole weekend at the lake with family and I don't have time. So, but when I get home Sunday night, I need to journal. And I know that because I can take a little bit of the winding and winding and winding as long as I don't sit with it for too long. So like
Hmm.
now I'm at a point where I'm like, it doesn't matter, you know, really what it was or how I fix it or that I go back and make amends or tell like I don't have to fix anything. I just have to sit down and go, I'm triggered because there was, a small argument in the car or something with my husband and like where did that come from? And I'll sit down and I'll write it out and I'll go, I really hate that he responded that way. And like I hate that he responded that way because I really want him to be himself and I don't want to judge him. And I'll kind of go through the thoughts in my head and then I'm like, this came from a place of me receiving that message and feeling like he thinks less of me, or
Hmm.
like he must think that I'm not a nice person because of the way he responded to what I asked, or something like that. And again, me wanting to make sure that someone, and that's all I have to do is be like, okay, I'm feeling like maybe he doesn't like me, but I know that he loves me, he's my husband. And so I can put that emotion down pretty easily. Some of them are not that easy, right? Some are like, I don't know why this bothers me really, but it does. And I'll just continue writing about it and I'll just leave it there. So it's to answer your question, I don't know if it's like situation story or if it's more the emotion. I think it's just me acknowledging as much as I can without maybe sometimes even fully understanding what happened,
Hmm.
but
Oh
just
my
going,
God.
I just feel this way. Yeah.
I just love how you explained it. I'm sure I'm gonna listen to this myself too multiple times again and
Well,
again because there's still a lot for me to learn as
yeah.
well as I'm not like fully recovered yet, and I
Yeah.
need to hear this over and over again, and like how writing is like going as deep as you can, right, to the very
And
bottom
there's
of things.
Yeah, because I think back a lot of times to when I was going through that pain and you and I would talk daily, right? And we would talk, I can talk to you for hours and tell you all the things that are going on and that are bothering me. And I can vent to a friend, right? And say, like, give me your advice and let's talk about it. But that never fixed me. And I think about that a lot and like why that didn't work. And I know now it's because I'm very good at communicating my thoughts and feelings, especially if I want someone to like understand what I'm going through. Like I'm really good at explaining myself and being really thorough and effective communicator. But that doesn't mean that I'm feeling them. I'm explaining them. I am talking about my feelings. I'm judging my own feelings a lot of times, right? I'm putting names on them and I'm labeling them and I'm judging them and I'm saying, I feel this way about it and I don't know why. But I'm not actually sitting with them and like honoring them, for a lack of a better word. But there's something that happens when I'm alone and I have to like just sit with them and be quiet and be in that space. And maybe this is where meditation, why it's so popular and how it has so much power. I was never a good meditator, but maybe that's my form of like, I just need to sit with it and feel it rather than talk about it and explain it. Or like in a journal, I'm mostly just writing to feel. I'm not writing to explain anything, or most of it's gibberish and it's jumble and it doesn't make sense to anybody. But
Yeah.
it's me like feeling that emotion in that moment rather than talking about it.
Oh yes, totally. It's like with writing, it's like you have to drop that perfectionist who's like every
Mhm.
sentence has to be perfect, has to make sense. No, it's just some of it is like total bullshit. Like you would read it later and you wouldn't understand, but don't read it anymore.
All over the
Like
page. Yeah, just a bunch of
I
swear
don't.
words like, all over the page.
Oh my God. And I noticed that when I do this, like sometimes I get so angry, like my pen goes like through the paper and the handwriting
Yeah.
changes changes from one style to the next. It's like a
Yeah,
total freaking mess.
yeah.
But you can like express yourself to another person the same way. I
Mm.
think, I don't know. What do you think? I just got this idea. Like when we vent to another person, we still don't go quite as deep because I think in a way there's maybe like a little bit of like a shame too. Like if I, let's say I tell my husband like, oh, this thing happened, it makes me a little bit annoyed. I don't want him to see how annoyed I got, or like
Yeah,
there's a level
you're
that where
still
I'm still thinking,
protecting.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
still
you're still
thinking back.
protecting yourself, and
Yeah,
almost protecting or like performing to a degree, because based on who the person is you're talking to, there are either, expectations you think they have or an image you want to keep up or something, to where there's some part of you even that's a little bit performing. And I think journaling takes all that away, because it doesn't matter. Even to me, I don't even care what I'm writing on the paper. So no one
uh-huh.
else is going to care. So that, I think that's a lot more honest. And what was it? One of the people said, if you can't journal, talk about it in the car when you're by yourself. And I do that sometimes. Oh, probably
Me
a lot
too.
more often. Yeah. And in the car, I find myself getting more emotional about stuff because I have the space and the privacy to do it. And I
Mhm.
think that's probably a little bit more powerful than just, being in a room with other people and thinking about it or something. Like the privacy aspect, I think, is also important.
Right. So you don't have to hide like anything if it's just you
Yeah.
and your thoughts. You just let it all out on paper
Burn.
or by yourself in the car. Yeah, and then the car thing too. Like my gym is 6 minutes away, and sometimes I use these 6 minutes to just like let it all out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh,
Exactly. And I
that.
think and you mentioned like it takes people longer, like it's taken you longer. And I remember hearing stories and people saying like, I've been working on this for a year or two and it's gotten better, but I'm not recovered. I think I was very lucky in the fact that the most of my fear probably was relieved when I admitted to myself, like, there's nothing physically wrong with me. I think that helped me so much personally. Just knowing that there's nothing physically wrong with me gives me such a sense of safety that
Mhm.
that's what I go back to. And I think that my most of my healing happened when I finally crossed that threshold. And then the rest of it is like maintenance and the emotional part. But I think I've personally just been really fortunate that I got there maybe a little easier, I think, than most do. And I don't know if that's a result of having grown up in like such a traumatic upbringing, and I'm just used to chaos, right? I'm a little bit like what's the word? Um, numb to the chaos, right?
Mm.
Desensitized to it a little bit. And I can deal with a lot of emotions without them affecting me. And I think there's other people who maybe are a little more sensitive in that they don't like sitting with uncomfortable emotions. Whereas
Mhm.
I'm very used to uncomfortable emotions. So it has to get pretty bad before I like, lose it. And I've been sensitive my whole life. So I just kind of, yeah, I think I was just fortunate
Mhm.
in that regard.
Yeah. Acceptance. Honestly, I think this is the most important thing, and I believe
Mhm.
that as long as we still have doubts, it's really
Yeah.
hard to recover.
Yep.
And what is the downside of believing that this is TMS? There's no downside. I mean, maybe the only thing might be that people are afraid that maybe the doctors missed something, and when I take the TMS approach, I'm going to miss something really critical. But usually all these people have already gotten like multiple tests and things, and they know there's no evidence of like physical
Right.
problem.
And
So
if
I'm
there
thinking,
is, if it
yeah,
even if it comes up, right, you can always go to the doctor. You can always go
yes.
back and ask them. But in my mind, even a visit with the doctor, even my daughter going to the doctor for her can like trigger my TMS, because doctors just scared, like they scare you. They like to say things that are, very black and white, and like you're either this or it just always, there's always something you leave a doctor with and you're like, oh, do I need to be concerned about that? Because they're going to be thorough and they're going to say all the things and they're going to do all the imagery, and most of it doesn't matter and it's not going to affect you. But they're going to continue to tell you about it and tell you what they can do about it, which in your mind makes you think, wow, there's something wrong with me, and the doctor's addressing it and they're saying I should do it. So like clearly I should worry about this. And then you're
Yeah.
on high alert worrying about it. And then every twinge and every whatever sends you down, the rabbit hole of, is that, might I have cancer now? Like it, I mean, to me, doctors just are very scary. So I would rather not, I don't know. I'd rather just not even wonder. And then if it gets really bad, someone will take me to the ER and someone will figure it out. But like till then,
Mhm.
I don't even want to, let me miss something and be fine. I'll miss all of it.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
yeah,
In
yeah,
this,
yeah.
in this case, for my mind, and I know how I work, it is bliss. I'm better off not knowing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like just
Mhm.
my husband just showed me he went to get acupuncture and then he showed me like this chart. Like he was like, this acupuncturist guy was really cool and he showed me like the imbalances in different like organs and things. And I was like, yeah, that's so cool. And I've been wanting to go get acupuncture too. It's been several years. I just enjoy it. I don't want to do
Yeah.
it to with TMS. I just enjoy it. But I told my husband, like, I don't think I'm gonna get that chart because I know where my mind might go, like, oh my God, is there an imbalance between the two lungs? Oh my God. So I'm like, I'm gonna opt
Yeah.
out of that, but I'm just gonna go get the needles and that's gonna be nice.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
have to watch that. If you know that you have this like hypervigilant tendency, don't like zoom into like every tiny thing that could be wrong and very likely isn't wrong.
Yeah.
So everybody has
100%.
imbalances and some problems, but
Yeah.
but we don't have to obsess about them.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think there's so much to be said for stress levels and being a calm. You were telling me earlier, like your husband's feeling like they're very calm people. I think people who have low levels of stress and deal with things in a more healthy, with a more healthy mindset and stay positive, have a leg up just in terms of overall health. Like
Yeah.
just the overall health and the benefits that you get from that. Like just I want to try to be that way as much as I can because I can
Mhm.
really be the opposite. And that's so, so bad for me, mentally, physically, all of it.
Yeah. I really want to talk next about like how have you changed as a person? And have you changed? I think so. But also you said that there are a lot of things you didn't have to even fix. So tell us a little bit more about it. Like, have you changed as a person? Did you change anything about your life after you recovered from TMS?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a loaded question.
Hmm.
Um, I think my TMS recovery and COVID, right, being all in the same sort of time, COVID was hard for everybody, right? It was a really weird time for all of us to really be at home to sit with ourselves. If you're in relationships, to have like a lot of close contact with the person that you're in a relationship with. So it's hard for me to like pinpoint whether the TMS work I did really made a lot of changes or whether I as a person just grew a lot through the shifts that I made during those years around COVID. And um, my brother, rest his soul, passed away right in 2020 as well. And so losing my brother, going through grief, loss, almost like rebirth, and meeting my husband now, love of my life, and my, all of that changing. There was so much that morphed in that time period that I don't know what came first or like what was chicken and egg, but I know that like I just woke up to so many things during COVID in terms of health and wellness. And I was very interested in not only, you know, what we're putting in our bodies and whatever, but just general kind of, mental well-being. And, we've had some conversations, like I've tried a lot of different things. I've done a lot to just get mentally well without prescription medications, right? I dealt with depression a lot of my life, and now I can say I don't ever have depression. And so I did a lot of things from a health aspect and learning and educating myself, but I also just kind of changed. And I don't know if it's like the people that you're around that influence you, or you want to be better because you're with someone who you think is just so wonderful and you want to be better for them or be more like them. But my like I said, my childhood was traumatic, and I was around a lot of addicts growing up. My first marriage was to an addict. My brother was an addict. My best friend was an addict. Like I surrounded myself with addicts and drug issues and people who just mentally couldn't handle the stress of life and didn't know how to cope. And I was very codependent because I thought that I knew how to cope and I was always doing well. So I was going to be the one to help them. And that completely shifted when I met my husband, because he is the type of person that is the opposite of that. He is the better version. He's the one who can really deal with life and has his stuff together, and is very calm and is very patient and very kind and very generous. And I think in those years, around that COVID time, I was also like having this great influence in my life who changed a lot of that for me. So between, that maybe even led me to TMS of like, I really need to be like healthy and mentally strong for this person, right? I don't want to be the person who's on antidepressants who has, back issues and surgeries, and nobody wants to be with that person. And I'm like, what's a healthier way to do this, right? And he's always eaten healthy and taken care of himself. And so I was on that journey anyway to try and be the best version of me. And then TMS was like I say it again, like it's almost too good to be true. It was like this like final sort of gift from the heavens of like, you don't have to have surgery. You don't even have to have back pain anymore. Like, this is the answer. You don't have to do anything. It's free. And it was there, and suddenly like everything just aligned in my life. And I was like, I am so fortunate. Like now I'm in a place where this awakening is more about like, I am so fortunate to be healthy and happy and with people who are good for me, who treat me well, and have the life that we have. And how do I just keep that? And that relates to sort of my journaling because I can spin off the rails mentally real quick. But if I
Mhm.
keep a handle on what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, then day to day it's easier. So not only do I not have back pain, but I'm also kind of in control of my emotions now, whereas before I could probably safely say my family would be nodding, going, "Yeah, yeah." Her emotions used to control her, like they controlled her, not the other way around. And now I think it's the other way around to some extent. I still have my moments, as my husband will tell you, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
Normal. Everybody has
Yeah,
their moments, I think.
yeah,
That's totally fine.
yeah.
How have you dealt with, you said that having to be a certain way or looking for people's approval and all these issues. How have you dealt with these things? Because they are a big contributor to
It
TMS.
is, and do you ever remember when you were younger and people would say to you, "Oh, when you get to be in your 30s and 40s, you won't care what people think." And I used to be like, "Why? Like, how am I not going to, how is it just going to change overnight?" And I don't know if it's becoming a mom or going through pregnancy, which is like really awkward and embarrassing and all the things, or if it's just time. But I've genuinely stopped caring as much. Like I'm at a point now where like I'll go out and sweats and no makeup. I don't even think about I don't even think to look in the mirror before I leave. I'm like, I'm doing my errands, I'm doing things I need to do. And it just doesn't occur to me to even care what I look like, which is not great. Most like not recommending that for anybody, but like I've gotten to a point where I'm so busy and my daughter's my priority and my family's my priority. And I don't care if we're at like a really, fun event and someone wants to take pictures. I used to be the person that's like, don't take pictures of me and don't post them because I don't, want people to see me that, whatever
Yeah.
that case was that day.
You have mascara
And
on.
now I'm like, cool, we're having this amazing, like, I hope that one day my daughter gets to see these pictures. Like, great, let's take photos and let's capture this memory and let's make sure that it lives forever for her. Or, I just, I have no idea, I'll say how that shift happened, but at some point it happened and it's by no means all cured, right? I still have moments where I'll get in situations and I look around like, you know, postpartum, right? There's people who are like bouncing back whenever, and you judge yourself because you're like, oh gosh, my belly is still. I mean, I have those moments still, but I think overall, I don't care what people think as much, which leads to like a little bit less people pleasing. It is instinct sometimes, or what is it, like habit sometimes. So sometimes I'll start to act in that way, and then I like remind myself like I don't actually care anymore. Um, but I don't know. I think maybe being a mom and having a much bigger priority is probably the biggest thing that's changed because, and I know I used to hear people say this, but I could never really like empathize. Like when I had her, I would do, and like, nothing matters as much as she does. I don't care about any, like I will walk across fire. I will do whatever to protect that girl. And when it comes to like her everyday things, they're just more important than anything else or anyone else in my life at this
Mhm.
point. And I think that's now, it's just a shift in focus. I'm just focused on her and not on myself, um,
Yeah.
for the time being.
Yeah. I think it's also really interesting how we are not able to see that we are already like really awesome. Like there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
us as people, right? So I'm sure that, a lot of people were looking at you like, she has everything. She is everything. She's like so great. And you were always still feeling like I'm still not good enough. I still have to do more. I still have to people please more to kind of earn that
Yeah.
approval. And a lot of times I'm looking at like other people. I'm like, how do you not see that you are already like totally enough? And why do you keep
Yeah.
beating yourself up? But there's something
Do the same thing to
internally.
yourself.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's so
I think
strong.
I'm wondering if like when people say, oh, as you get older, it's you give yourself more opportunities to show up imperfectly. And when you show up imperfectly and they still accept you and they still love you, and most of them don't even bat an eyelash. They're like, it's the same cat that showed up the other day. Like she doesn't have makeup on or she's put on 20 pounds from like whatever. They're like, treat you exactly the same. They don't have any clue about the insecurity that you're dealing with. And I think you get sort of once you show up multiple times like that, you're like, all right, so they don't. And I think it changes the sort of stigma that you have in your mind of like people are going to judge me or people are not going to love me once you've done it enough times that you're like it really doesn't matter. So I'm wondering if that's also what happens with age. It's like you have more examples of times where you're like they didn't care, and so then you start to learn that it really doesn't matter. Like maybe that's what it is. But I've, you know, even going through childbirth and stuff, like you want to talk about body image and whatever, like that all goes out the window when when you're giving birth and you're like, I don't care what anybody thinks of how fat my ass looks right now. Like it does not matter. And then from there, you just like I've the breastfeeding in public, all the things like you have to be really strong and tough. And I think I grew a lot through that, but also just in the times of being less than I thought I should be and that being okay and learning that like it's okay. Everyone thinks it's okay. I feel okay. Like this is not an issue. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is such a big thing in recovery. I think coming to terms with like who you are, accepting yourself. Uh,
yeah,
of course, for so many people, it's so much, harder to do than it is, easier said than done type
yeah,
of thing.
yeah,
So in that sense, I totally understand like taking care of another human, like a
yeah,
tiny human is, but takes all your attention. You just don't have the
yeah,
time to obsess about every
yeah.
single thing yourself,
And
right?
I still do like if I say this chapter of my life, I have aspirations of like, finding myself again and getting into a good rhythm, with her routine and with my life and getting back into the gym. Like it doesn't mean I don't take care of myself anymore. I still want to get back into lifting, right? I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. I want to feel good physically and emotionally. And so that doesn't go away, but
Mhm.
it changes in terms of how important it is and also having healthy sort of prioritization and or how much you're
Balance.
going to dedicate versus like obsessing about it and shaming myself when I don't go to the gym is like I would love to get there. If it doesn't happen today, that's no big deal. And I've
Mm-hmm.
become a lot more sort of what's the word I'm looking for, self-accepting or something like that about it, of just having grace for myself, having a lot more grace for myself.
Yeah, and flexible, I think too. Like if things
Yeah,
don't work out today, well, so what? Tomorrow is another
yep,
day.
yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
perfectionism habit is super hard for a lot of people to break. Like they think that my workout days are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It has to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday every week, and if it's not, then it's not good enough. It's just it can spin in such crazy places.
Yeah.
But I think it's so true what you said. Like you have to get evidence of like not being perfect.
Mhm.
Like you said, going out without makeup or not doing the workout on Wednesday and getting the evidence that the world didn't end, didn't die,
Mhm.
people didn't reject you.
Yeah,
You're still the same person, you're still a good person. And I think the
yeah.
more you get this type of evidence, the safer you feel that I can be the way I am and I don't have to like, you
There's
know,
so much less pressure. Like
yeah.
it's so much easier to live with so much less pressure. Like even in the times where I put up boundaries with people like my own mother, right? I've always had just, such a somewhat challenging relationship with her. And I think now like I put up boundaries and normally my inside inner child would be screaming like she's going to hate you, she's going to be mad at you. She said don't do that. Like be good to her, take care of her. You owe her this. She's your mother. All the things that she used to scream into my
Mm,
mind. And now I put up boundaries and I just feel lighter and
yeah.
she has responded well. And I think that you get again these examples of people responding well, and you feel and you're like, it was this easy all along, and I was making it so hard.
Mm, that's interesting. Yeah. I'm sure sometimes people have the opposite experience too, but you still kind of
Yeah,
have to
and
do
even if they don't respond well, right? In some cases, they may not respond well, but you're like, damn, I stood my ground, and I didn't have to go where I didn't want to go and do what I didn't want to do. I feel great. Like this is
it.
awesome.
It is. I've experienced the same thing too, like with
Mhm.
boundaries. It's so the first time you actually do it, it's really scary. And
Yeah.
I remember a couple of times, I have to do it via phone with somebody, set a boundary, and then you just sit there and you're like frozen with fear, like what's the
Mhm.
response going to be?
Yeah.
But then it was normal, it was fine, and
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, was it really like worth like all these years of not saying this thing?
Yeah.
I could have done it years ago,
Yeah.
right?
I think a lot of
Mm,
times now it's just the habit, breaking the habit loop. Like I know I want to put a boundary, but I have to catch myself before the like part of me that's so used to just saying yes and people pleasing jumps in. I have to like reel her back in and be like, whoa, I was almost just sure, no problem. Yeah, whatever you guys want. And I have to like catch it because I'm so quick to go back into that habit mode that I used to operate in.
yeah.
And yeah, that's the most challenging part, I think.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap up in a minute because I know you gotta go soon. But can you tell
Yeah.
us, like, do you need to do any maintenance work, and do you ever get any sensation still, or is it like completely not anymore?
So I was thinking of like the things I now sort of would leave with as like my biggest things. And one is like I said, convincing yourself, right, that you have TMS and that it's not a body, physiological issue that you're dealing with. And then the second part to that is like doing the work, right? Getting through doing the journaling and making sure that you're taking care of yourself emotionally and getting it out. And I still do that. Um, but sometimes like it's really just having grace for yourself and shutting down like the fear. And I think a lot of people that are recovering from TMS have like mantras around like safety. And for
Mhm.
me, it's like making sure, if there's something that's making me feel unsafe or there's something that is causing me to feel like um, some catastrophe might happen or I'm not okay in this situation and something bad is going to happen to me. I have to take care of those. And so like yes, I still have to do maintenance in terms of like, what am I feeling? Journaling sometimes more than others, right? Sometimes I might go through a few weeks. Recently, I left my job. I haven't not worked since I was 18 years old for 20. It's very hard to have a life shift like that. And I knew I'm dealing with something really big. There's a lot of insecurity around not working. There's a lot of questions that I have. So I had to do a lot of work through that period because I knew I'm feeling a lot of things because there's a lot going on in my life. But also like finding a space where I can feel safe and like what does that look like and what does that mean? Sometimes it's a change, right? Sometimes something really does need to change. Sometimes it's just acknowledging it, but sometimes it's like, I don't feel safe, and this is why. And maybe we need to do something differently, or I need to make, some kind of big or small life change, whatever it might be. Um, the only thing I can think of recently is because it's most recent was leaving my job, but that was a thing that was making me feel very unsafe and triggered every single day. And I had a lot of issues that luckily didn't manifest into terrible back pain, but other symptoms, right? And I finally caught it. I'm like, I can't stay in. This is very toxic for me, and I don't feel safe in this environment. And
Mhm.
that's where I made like a shift. And over time, over our lives, we're probably going to do that many times.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that lack of safety, how does it feel like physically to you or in some other ways that this is not safe?
yeah. I mean, I think I feel almost like an anxiety, right? It shows
Yeah.
up as like anxiety and like maybe doom and gloom in terms of sometimes if it's depression, it's like a doom of like this wet blanket over you.
Hmm.
But also I'll start to get randoms like after my TMS, after my back pain healed, my shoulder started to hurt, my wrist had issues, my elbow at one point, I thought I had some kind of elbow issue. I had like a brace on my elbow, and then I'm like, what's wrong with me? This is TMS. But it does,
Should
it
know by
comes
now,
back in
right?
physical, and I can definitely feel um the kind of unease, right? The like vibrations almost is maybe a way
Hmm.
to describe them of like I'm just vibrating and I don't know what it is, but I need to figure it out and get it out. And if getting it out doesn't work, is there a reason it keeps coming back every day? Like, am I in a situation where I feel unsafe or scared? Again, for me, I can always trace everything back to fear. I'm scared of something.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you described what you mean by like not feeling safe because I think a lot of people don't know because you hear this terminology all the time in the TMS world. Like you have to make yourself feel safe. I'm like, but I don't feel unsafe. But I'm so
Mhm.
glad that you said that you get like anxiety, you get depression. These are signs of
Yeah.
not feeling safe. So that I'm so
Yep.
glad that you explained
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's tough.
Okay. Yeah, I'm so excited that I'm so happy that we had this talk today and
Yeah. Thank
glad to
you.
hear that you're fully recovered and enjoying your life. So
Thank you for letting me share. I know these stories when I was recovering were so powerful for me, so I'm glad I get to at least share mine. So thank you for making that possible.
absolutely. All right. Well, have a good weekend. It's almost here. It's Friday right now. And
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Bye bye.